Hi, everyone, and welcome to Dead to Rights, the podcast. Spring is just around the corner. We're here today on March 3rd, and it's a beautiful sunny Sunday. And I'm going to be bringing you my interview with M.H. Callway. That's Madeline Harris Callway, author of the novel Windigo Fire, as well as many novellas and short stories. And today I'm going to be speaking with Madeline about our upcoming short story contest for the Mesdames of Mayhem, which is currently underway, and it's quite time sensitive. So I hope you'll stay with us and learn how to participate in our short story contest, and hopefully have your story featured in our upcoming anthology by the Mesdames of Mayhem, which will be titled In the Key of 13. So give a listen to our podcast, and when we're all done, please get in touch with Madeline, and she'll be reachable at mcalway1@gmail.com. That's mcalway1@gmail.com. Now, without any further fuss, here's Madeline Harris Callway.
Hi, Donna.
Hi, how are you this morning, Madeline? And welcome to Dead to Rights.
Oh, I'm feeling great, Donna. Thanks very much, and it's terrific to be back on the show.
Yes. I definitely wanted to have you back because we have a new anthology coming out, and I wanted you to tell us a little bit about that. What is it called?
Well, we put it to the group. We had such great success with our other three anthologies that we decided to vote on which theme to use as it's better for both the authors and the readers if we have like a really cool theme. And this time people voted for music, so it's going to be music and murder.
Okay.
And so you were asking me about the title some time ago, and we voted on that too.
Okay.
And so we came up. We like to do these things as a group, as part of as a part of the team. And the title that everybody liked best was called "In the Key of 13."
Perfect.
Keeping up again with our theme of 13.
Yes, absolutely. In the Key of 13, and it is coming out when?
We are hoping to have our print and ebook editions out in September of this year. That's September 2019.
Perfect.
And
so
that'll be
Sorry, go ahead, Madeline.
And that'll be in time for our launch around Halloween in October.
Excellent. And that is going to be Carrick Publishing. We'll have that ready in September, and it'll be officially launched in late October, as close to Halloween as possible. And our launch will be held at the Sleuth of Baker Street bookstore in Toronto. Now, it's very early in the year to be talking about an October launch, but the reason that I wanted to talk to you now, Madeline, is because we are actually holding a contest that is closing soon, and we wanted to bring that out to authors out there. Can you tell us a little bit about the contest?
Oh, of course, Donna, I'd be delighted to. We started this contest back last year for 13 Claws, our third anthology. And one of the reasons we did this is to encourage new and emerging writers in the mystery genre. Many of the Madame of Mayhem are teachers. And, for instance, Mel Campbell has taught for many years at Sheridan College, and Rosemary McCracken has taught also for many years at George Brown College. And plus, many of us deliver seminars and at conferences and through the Toronto Public Library. We want to pass on knowledge to new writers. And one of the best ways to encourage new writers is through a contest. And this gives a new and emerging writer a lot of exposures because they're there amongst established authors, and they can list this publication on their resume as a credit.
Mm-hmm.
So we started this new contest, and we have been running it now for a few weeks, and the deadline is coming up the 1st of March.
The 1st of March. So if you've got a story that would fit the theme of murder and music, then what I can tell you from Carrick Publishing's perspective is the story must not quote any actual words or text from any song, regardless of whether it's in the public domain. We will not accept that. We will reject that out of hand. But it can quote the title of a song or a piece of music. That is permissible. And the deadline to submit your story is March 1st. Madeline, is there any word count guideline that we set for that?
We haven't set any word count that's carved in stone. We like to give people as much freedom to write as short or as long as they like. The suggested guideline is around 5,000 words, but some stories can be told very, briefly as a flash fiction as 1,000 words.
Yes, we do accept flash fiction into the anthology. And if it is a longer work, if it's encroaching on what we would call novella length, we will also allow that. I would suggest the ceiling would probably be around 8,000 words. That's a loose ceiling. If you've got a story that's a little bit longer, we'd consider it. But we're not looking for a full novella or novel length story.
Not at all. And we suggest that probably most crime stories, including the ones that are in our anthology, tend to come in between 3,000 and 5,000 words.
Yeah, that's a very good guideline. And it must include the theme of murder and music. So that's going to be the basic guideline. And where do listeners send their stories?
We are asking people to do electronic submissions, and we're asking them to send them to this account, and I'll spell it out for you. It's mcallway1@gmail.com. So it's all lowercase, mcallway1@gmail.com.
So that's mcallway1, and that's the number 1, @gmail.com. And that's where you would send your electronic submissions. Must be in Word document format. No hate literature of any kind. But other than that, there's a lot of freedom to work in. So crime writers out there who are listening, get your story in. And how many stories will be chosen for the anthology?
Well, that's a difficult question because when we ran our last contest, we had a lot of excellent submissions, and it was really, really hard to make a decision. So what we ended up doing, we actually ended up choosing 3 stories, both the winner and the 2 finalists, because as I said, all of the stories were of such great quality.
Yeah.
So we will really be looking at actually the word length of the book that we will have because of the authors that have already been invited. But I believe that we'll be able to accommodate certainly the winner and perhaps the runner-up.
Okay.
In our book.
Okay, excellent. So this is something really to pay attention to. We'll be looking at things like story structure, technical skills, movement of plot, and plot devices, especially since it is a mystery genre, and anything else that you care to throw in as one of your skill elements. So get your stories in by March 1st to mcallway1@gmail.com. So now that we've got the call for submissions out of the way, tell us a little bit about the Mesdames of Mayhem in general.
Well, thanks, Dot. I'd be delighted to. Well, we've been running now for almost 6 years. It's quite frightening to think how quickly time goes.
That's unbelievable. And we've produced an anthology every second year of that time. This is going to be our 4th anthology. The first few were titled 13, and then we had 13 O'Clock, which had a time-based theme. And then we had 13 Claws, which was all about our beloved furry and feathered friends. And
That's
now
right.
in the key of 13. And tell us a little bit about some of our members. Let's start with you, Madeline. Tell us about your writing chops. You've got an excellent book out.
Oh, thank you, Donna. Well, I was actually trained as a scientist, but I always, since I was a child, had been writing. when I was a small child, I used to write plays and make my friends perform in them, with mixed success, shall we say.
Mm-hmm.
But and then as I went on in life, I ended up in science and then business and IT. But then, sort of later in life, I did come back to my first love, which was writing, and I started to write mysteries because that's what I read all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Again, as I tell people in my workshop how to get published, the best way to get some recognition is to write short stories, which is
Mm-hmm.
exactly what I did. And I had beginner's luck, and one of my very first stories, um, Kill the Boss, was a winner for a contest held by the Crime Writers of Canada.
Excellent. Excellent. And that, which was that the Arthur Ellis Short Story Award?
No, it was a special contest that I called the Golden Horseshoe Award that the Crime Writers of Canada held back many years ago now, for exactly the same reason as we are holding our contest today,
Yeah.
which was to encourage emerging writers.
Mm-hmm.
And since that time, I've gone on to write, many short stories and had many short stories published. But I always wanted to write a novel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And my very first novel was a bit of a disaster. It lives in my filing cabinet. But as I tell my students, it's really important it's a really important first step. I learned so much writing that epic failure. And it was actually the second novel that I wrote that eventually got published. That was Wendigo Fire. And it's a survivalist thriller set in Northern Ontario.
Yeah, and again, it's called Wendigo Fire, and I suggest that all listeners go look for it. It's a beautiful book. It's really well written, really well plotted. The characters are really terrific, and because it is a survivalist thriller, it's got an awful sense of adventure too, a really good sense of adventure. So it's really well worth reading. Wendigo Fire by M.H. Callway. And we've also in our group tell me a little bit about Melody Campbell.
Yes, Melody Campbell is our queen of comedy. And we in our group, one of the things that makes us such a vibrant group is that we write so differently. We can write very dark material, such as you and I write, Donna,
Mm-hmm.
and then we can ranging all the way to straight out hilarious comedy, which Mel is an absolute master on. Mel has a terrific series, the Goddaughter series, that I absolutely personally love. And her latest book has just come out, The Goddaughter Does Vegas.
Yes, I just got my copy of it, in fact, The Goddaughter Does Vegas by Melody Campbell. And she writes rip-roaring characters. They're novellas, they're fast reads, and they're just a lot of fun. We've also got Catherine Dunphy, and she was a journalist in Toronto for a while, and she's the author of a true a nonfiction about Morgenthaler. Is that right, Madeline?
That's right. Kathy is fearless, and she is not afraid to take on difficult issues. As you can say, she was very brave, I think, personally, to take on writing about such a controversial figure as Morgenthaler. And she was actually up for a Governor General's Prize, I believe, for that book.
Yeah. She is an excellent writer, too, and she will be in our anthology. We've got Catherine Astolfo, who writes an absolutely wonderful series, including books like Legend and I think The Seventh Fire. Is that right?
That's right. And Kathy's written several novels, and with novels which have an awful lot of warmth and heart. That's why when she wrote her story in 13 Claws was such a departure, because it is true noir.
Mm-hmm.
It's a truly frightening story. She wrote that based on her experience traveling in Newfoundland with her husband.
Yes. And the story basically is about somebody who seeks out a man who disappeared after being released from prison. And I'm not going to tell any more about it because it's a short story and it's too easy to spoil a short story. But it's well worth reading. It was just chilling, and it won the Arthur Ellis Best Short Story Award.
That's right. In fact, when we were privileged to be reviewed by Jack Batten in the Toronto Star, and he said the story would make even Paul Bernardo terrified. The
Yes,
story, by the way, is called The Outlier
that's right.
by Catherine Astolfo and 13 Claws, and I would thoroughly recommend it.
Yes, yes. We've also got Rosemary Aubert, who is our member at large. And Rosemary has written the highly acclaimed Ellis Portal mystery series and is a
Yes,
very prolific writer. She's also a poet. If you ever get a chance to look her up, Rosemary Aubert, Aubert, and well worth reading.
yes, yes, that's right. And Rosemary, started out as a poet, which is very interesting, and then digressed into mystery writing.
Yes, yes. And Rosemary is also, she's got a deep passion for mathematics and for science. And her latest book of poetry is all about Sir Isaac Newton. And it's from the point of view of Sir Isaac Newton. And it's just a wonderful book. I can't say enough about it. And the book is titled Strong, Certain, and Alone, Poems in the Voice of Sir Isaac Newton by Rosemary Aubert. And it's just a really terrific read. It's very cerebral. It's very fun. There are some poems in there and it draws on her research and history of Sir Isaac Newton. So, you can see her passion for the science and the physics and the mathematics in the poetry. It's really a combination of left and right brain. So it's worth
Yes,
it for anyone who wants to read something just a little different.
I know. It's very interesting. Rosemary, for many years, attended a week-long class at Cambridge University. That's Cambridge in England, which allowed people with an arts background to understand higher mathematical concepts.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what she did, and that's where she saw the prism that Isaac Newton had used, and that is what inspired her to write this book of
Yeah,
poetry.
yeah. And her own background in her younger career was in Law and Order. So she also brings that element to a lot of her writing. A lot of her short stories feature a judge, and I won't tell you much more than that, but she's an absolutely wonderful writer. She teaches courses on writing and is a member of the Arts and Letters Club in Toronto. We've also got Lisa DeNicolets. Tell me a little bit about Lisa. She's one of our Dead to Rights interviewees, as a matter of fact, and her interview will be coming up soon.
Yes, that's right. Lisa is an unbelievably prolific writer. Like, I am just in total awe. She's constantly writing, despite working full time as a graphic designer. She has written, I think this is her 8th book, is The
Wow.
Rotten Peaches.
Mm-hmm.
And all her books are quirky. There are mysteries. They're quite violent, some of them. They all have an element of human psychology,
Mm-hmm.
psychopathology, one could almost say, especially with Rotten Peaches, and elements of a mystical element as well. For instance, No Fury Like That was set in purgatory, where purgatory is envisaged as this therapy session where you have quite good food. And it's quite nice, but you have to work at getting better and to becoming a good person.
Yeah, and
The Rotten
her
Peaches.
latest Rotten Peaches has come out just recently, and it's just very disturbing and kind of unforgettable. It's set
Yes,
in
yes.
South Africa and the U.S. and Canada, so it's a kind of an international story.
And not a very nice people, as Lisa said herself. She was surprised again, as Kathy was surprised to find this dark side of her nature in the Outlier. Lisa found this dark side of her nature, and these rather unpleasant characters
Yeah.
popped up and started taking over the novel.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all fairly murderous and violent,
Yeah.
but fascinating just the same. In fact, Rotten Peaches was just selected by the Toronto Star as a Valentine book.
Okay.
But
Okay.
But it's
Wow.
more like kind of like, I guess, the dark side of love.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we've got names here that really go deep into the whole writing community, the crime writing community in Canada. We've got Sylvia Maltosh-Warsh, who is a critically acclaimed author here in Toronto, and
Yes.
she's written. Tell me a little bit about her work.
Yeah, Sylvia has written a series, the Rebecca Temple series, which is very highly regarded. In fact, Sylvia is our resident Edgar winner. Um, some time ago, one of the Rebecca Temple books won Best Paperback Novel, um, the Edgar for Best Paperback Novel,
Yeah,
paperback
yeah.
original.
She's
It was
also
a
got
huge,
standalones like Best Girl, but I think my favorite book by her was Find Me Again.
yes,
She also has a really, truly wonderful standalone called The Queen of Unforgetting.
yes,
Yeah.
that's right. That's set up in Midland, and Sylvia's actually there was
They
uh,
dedicated a plaque to her in Midland.
that that's right. There was a program, a nationwide program, to actually which to recognize how Canadian settings
Mm-hmm.
influenced Canadian literature, and they would put a plaque up to say this is the setting that inspired a particular literary author to write their novel. And we're delighted that Sylvia's book, The
Yeah,
Queen of Unforgetting, was recognized in this way up in Midland, Ontario, which was the setting that inspired Sylvia to write the novel.
yeah. We've got Cheryl Friedman, who she's a member of the Mesdames of Mayhem, and she for many years ran the largest crime conference in Canada called Bloody Words. And so we're thrilled to have Cheryl. Cheryl is an extraordinary copy editor and editor. So if you're ever looking for a really good editor, you want to look up Cheryl Friedman.
Absolutely. But the thing was that I'm a little bit sad is that because Cheryl is also an excellent writer, but
Yes.
she spends most of her time editing, and she's assisted many authors to move on to be quite well recognized in the
Yeah.
Canadian crime writing community. But sometimes I wish Cheryl would spends a bit more time on her own writing. She tends to write quirky.
Yeah.
She's also, she's loves speculative fiction.
Yeah, she's got
So
a really
her,
fun mentality and it comes through in her work. And as you say, quirky is a great word to describe Cheryl's writing. We've also got Caro Souls, and Caro is a mainstay of the Canadian crime industry. And tell us a little bit about Caro.
yeah, so well, Caro and Cheryl together founded the Bloody Words Conference, which ran for many years, was a national conference for Canadian crime writing. And Caro has since retired and moved on to, well, the Bloody Words now is a mini-con, which is a one-day conference every year around the time of the Arthur Ellis Awards banquet towards the end of May. And Caro has written prolifically. Again, she also writes speculative fiction, erotica,
Mm-hmm.
and but she has written now two standalone mysteries. People Like Us is her latest publication.
That's right. People Like Us. People Like Us. It looks like a really wonderful book. We've got Ed Pivowarchik, and Ed is our own copy editor for the Mesdames of Mayhem anthologies. Ed's got a background in journalism and in copy editing, and he worked for a long time for the National Post, where I used to see him in the National Post building. So he is a wonderful addition to our group. He joined us about 5 years ago and has been with us since as both a contributing author, and his stories are wonderful. I would consider them dark.
Yes, yeah, definitely noir but very well written.
Extremely well written, yes. And
And
sorry.
no, it's Ed has been wonderful to our group because the copy editing requires such a lot of skill, and it's not just finding typos; it's phrasing
Yes,
and
yes.
as we mentioned earlier within the E57, reminding us of copyright laws
Mm-hmm.
because it's easy to fall astray.
Yes.
And again, just as a reminder for anyone who is considering to submit to our contest, please make sure that if you are quoting from the song, that it is in the public domain.
Actually, we will not accept any quotes from songs, whether they're in public domain or not. That has to be really clear. Ed and I had an extensive conversation. We've decided that titles can be quoted, but song lyrics cannot. So you can refer to a song, you can refer to those lines from that well-known song, but you cannot quote the song.
Very good, very good.
Yeah. Because the rules are just too tricky and we don't want the liability. So that's to put it out there very clearly. We've also got Jane Peterson Burfield, I should say. And Jane is also well established in the Canadian crime industry. She has been a contributor to anthologies all over the country for many years. Tell us a little bit about Jane. And you and I are going to be seeing Jane on Tuesday, I believe. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jane is a gifted short story writer. She started out as a journalist as well, and then went to the Humber College School of Creative Writing. And anyway, the way she actually became a crime short story writer is a fun story. She was encouraging her friend to enter this contest that we had with the Bloody Words conference called the Boney Pete Contest. So her friend said, "I'll do it if you do it." So Jane tossed off a story and ended up winning.
Oh, yeah, that's wonderful. She had beginner's luck. I know she says that in her bio. She had beginner's luck, and she just decided to run with it. She loves killing off fictional characters who have done wrong. So
right.
her favorite victims are also villains. And we've got, not to be overlooked, we've got Rosemary McCracken, who is also a prolific author in her own right. She writes a financial thriller series featuring Pat Tierney, who is a financial advisor. And so these are white-collar crimes which may or may not lead to murders, and often do. And Rosemary's been very highly acclaimed for this series as well.
Yes, Rosemary draws on her experience as a journalist writing in finance, and one of the reasons that she took up writing this series was to expose financial scams and double dealings. And when you read Rosemary's wonderful series, Safe Harbor, Blackwater, and Raven Lake, you will find all kinds of chicanery.
Uh-huh.
One of the ones that comes to mind is in Raven Lake about the cottage scams, because, you and I both own cottages, is about how people will take a photograph, or bad guys will take a picture of a cottage and then put it up as an Airbnb.
Yes.
And so when the poor people arrive thinking they're going to have this lovely cottage to rent, they're confronted by the owners who know nothing about this scam.
Yeah. Yeah.
And meanwhile, somebody's made off with the poor visitors' money.
Oh, dear.
So,
yeah,
Rosemary uses that in Raven Lake.
Yeah, and she would know about that because she used to maintain a cottage up north, and it's a terrible scam that is, just one of many terrible scams that we're facing these days. We've also got Lynn Murphy, and Lynn was one of the original, I want to say this correctly, she was one of the original presidents of the Toronto Sisters in Crime chapter. And Lynn has been in the crime writing industry for a very long time. Can you tell us a little bit about Lynn's background?
Yes, Lynn was a journalist too. I think we're catching a theme here.
Yes.
But because journalists, they have to produce, and
yes.
That's the same thing as a writer. You have to produce, and you have to keep writing. And as a journalist, if you wanted to eat, you had to write. But now Lynn writes for fun. And
yes.
She has a terrific series of short stories that are set in a senior's apartment building, from growing marijuana, more or less inadvertently, to righting wrongs. It's a wonderful group of ladies, and we can look forward to seeing another story by Lynn Murphy in the Key of 13.
Lynn's work is just sheer fun. I mean, she went from studying journalism at Carleton University. She worked for the Ottawa Journal when it was still working, and she's also been an editor for CBC Radio News. And she was one of the first women editor that CBC Radio News ever hired. So she's got some chops. But her work now is fun. It's lighthearted, and it brings home the fact that the Mesdames are inclusive and that our stories in our anthologies really do, they cover a broad range.
Yes, yes. We range from comedy to noir.
Exactly. Now, getting down to some of our newer members, I'm going to start with Marilyn Kay because Marilyn has jumped right into the Mesdames with both feet. And she's actually become our new web mistress, which is wonderful because that's a hard job. I know, having once done it. So.
And she's yes, and she writes our monthly newsletter, which readers can find by checking out our website www.mesdamesofmayhem.com. And the first of every month, our newsletter is up, which tells about the doings of our members, and especially events that are coming up where you can meet us in person in Meet Space rather than cyberspace, and about our upcoming publications.
Yes. And Marilyn is also a contributing author to our 13 series of anthologies. We've got Kevin Thornton, and Kevin has he's a fantastic short story writer, but we tease Kevin because we call him always a bridesmaid, never a bride. He has been nominated for awards for his short stories, I believe 6 times. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
It was actually 7 last year.
Wow. And I would not be surprised if he's nominated again this year.
But there are many bridesmaids of the Arthur Ellis Awards winner, and one of the most remarkable ones is Maureen Jennings, who is one of Canada's best mystery authors and the creator of the Murdoch series, which is an international series on television, and also going to be the Canadian guest of honor at the upcoming conference Left Coast Crime in Vancouver at the end of March. So just because you're a bridesmaid doesn't necessarily mean it's going to impact your career.
No, exactly. And I can't tell you what a thrill I get because I have a lot of friends online. I try to be active in social media. And every time somebody somewhere in the world mentions the Murdoch series, I get a little thrill. It's not because I have any ownership or pretend any ownership, but just knowing Maureen Jennings as I do. And we all know her. She's very well ensconced in our industry here in Canada. I get that thrill on her behalf. I just love to hear people speak highly about that series and her other work, which is all phenomenal. But, getting back to Kevin, so we don't digress too much, Kevin writes from the funny bone, I would say. So if you're looking for humor in your crime, Kevin's your man.
He is. Kevin, again, is another person who's into a lot of cross-genre because I think he writes his stories tend to segue sometimes into speculative fiction. Yes. But I love those kind of stories personally because I feel it just re-energizes our whole genre.
That's right. And Kevin is going to be a contributing author this year in the Key of 13. That's right. So I'm thrilled that we're going to be including him. And that's Kevin Thornton, if you're ever looking for him. We've also, I'm going to try and wrap this up a little bit. We've also got Mary M. Patterson, who was new in our last anthology with a wonderful story. What was the name of her story?
Her story it was about a cat, which is, of course, why I absolutely loved it, because I'm a cat person. And her story was called Night Vision.
Night Vision. Okay.
And it was actually the winner of our contest for 13 Claws. And Night Vision was about a private detective who has a cat as a partner, but the cat is a lot smarter.
And we've got Rosalind Place, and Rosalind wrote, do you know the title of Rosalind's book in our last anthology?
I do. And Roz is written many literary stories. She wrote a story called Dana's Cat, again about a cat, but this is not a lighthearted story like the one Mary wrote. This is quite a dark story about a cat that is a witness to a crime. But Rosalind has written many literary stories that are specifically based in Prince Edward County, which is where Roz actually lives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And she's written a wonderful novel, and which has received a lot of attention already as an unpublished manuscript, and we're really hoping that she's going to find an agent. It's a young adult novel, and
Wonderful.
we're looking
Wonderful.
forward
It'll be
to
really
seeing
good
that.
to see all these Mesdames of Mayhem again. And we've got another very, very new member, Madonna Scaff.
Yes, and she is based in Ottawa and has written a terrific novel that came out a few years ago, and it was called Journey of a Thousand Steps, and about a young woman who suffers from a serious medical condition but is able to solve a serious crime. And Madonna has also written several stories that have also received a lot of acclaim.
And she's got a degree in cell biology, and
Yes.
spent her life working in mining research of all things.
Another scientist who saw the light. Right.
Well, she does say that her scientific background does sneak into even her mysteries, not just her science fiction. So, and she's been in both our anthologies, the Mesdames anthologies. She's also been in the Sisters in Crime anthologies, the whole shebang, and the whole shebang too. So, as have a number of our authors. All of our authors are well, and again, the number of authors shows that we've been growing, because we started out initially with 13 authors. That's why our first anthology was going to be named 13. Before we even had it published, we had grown to 16 authors.
That's right, Donna. And now we are 19
19
authors.
authors, and all of them well known in the Canadian crime writing world. So it's really quite something. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I think our listeners probably know about myself, but I am one of the Mesdames. I'm one of the original. Madeline came up with the idea, and we ran with it. And I've been publishing through Carrick Publishing the Mesdames anthologies. I've also been a contributing author to each one of them. And as you know, the host of Dead to Rights, the podcast. So that's me, as well as an author of several novels. So I stay pretty busy.
And that's great. So how do you find podcasting, Donna?
I love doing it. I absolutely love doing it. I think, I would love to get the listenership up. So please, if you're listening now, spread the news to your friends. I try to interview a different author every week. In 2018, I interviewed 52 distinct authors, so that was wonderful. And 52 weekly episodes. I try to put them up on Sunday. Depending on my schedule, I may be a day or two late, sometimes actually getting them to go live. But I love doing it. And the reason is because I just love knowing as much as I can about the writing industry internationally. I've interviewed authors in Germany, in Australia, in the UK, all over the United States and Canada. And it's just been an absolute delight. And I've interviewed authors in all genres, but my own genre is crime, and I love interviewing crime authors, whether they're true crime or fiction. So, for me, it's been really a godsend. It's been something I really wanted to do. And my goal in 2019 is to get good enough at this and to have technology that works well enough that I can start creating audiobooks. Because that's what I've always wanted to do, is to get audiobooks out there for myself and for all of our Carrick Publishing authors. It's really something that I just want to do,
Yes, and I think audiobooks, there's really a huge demand for that. I mean, we spend so much time stuck in traffic.
Yes. I do a lot of my reading right now through Audible. And just like when I first got into e-publishing, I noticed at the time, and this has changed, of course, a lot through the years, but at the time when I first got into it, there was a need for quality formatting and quality editing because ebooks were so new. They were so open to everyone that the market got really flooded with a lot of things that were not really up to snuff in terms of quality. I did so many hours of research, hundreds of hours of research on how to format properly for e-publishing before I started doing it. And at the time, to pat myself on the back a bit, I was one of the pioneers of people who really wanted to create quality e-publishing. And I'm hoping to do the same thing with Audible, quite frankly, to get really good quality audio publishing out there. I know it is out there because I listen to it a lot. So that's the way I want to go. I want to be one of the people that can really be relied on to produce something good.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the audiobooks are a way of reaching around the globe, as you were just telling the audience, that you're interviewing people in Australia, you're interviewing people in England.
Yes, and even Germany, So Dead to Rights is open to authors of all genres all over the world. So if you want to be interviewed, by all means, get in touch with me, carrickpublishing@rogers.com. Now, Madeline, what's next for you? Other than the anthology, which is the obvious one.
Well, yes, I'm looking forward to taking up some of my other projects. I've been clearing out my office, and I found in my files all these half-written stories, half-written novels, half-written novellas, and I think it's time to actually write end to these stories. I have a good friend, Sam Weeb, another crime writer on the West Coast, and Sam teaches creative writing, and what he tells his students is the best thing you can put in your story is the end. And
Yes.
That's what I'm going to do.
Yes. And that's something
important.
All writers will understand. The best thing you can do is to complete your project. Get it finished. Get it finished. Get it finished. You can't even edit it till it's finished.
That's right. And it's another good friend of mine, Gail Hamilton, another Prince Edward County writer, a historical writer, says you spend your time, what you need to do is make the clay. So you make the clay, your first draft. That's always the hardest.
Yeah. Look, I knit and I crochet, kind of fanatically. Anybody who knows me knows that I do this. And one of the hardest things you can do when you knit is when you get quality yarn, people who don't knit this won't know, it doesn't come in balls the way that some of the cheaper yarns do. It comes in skeins. And one of the hardest things you can do is prepare your skeins into balls of yarn. Winding the yarn, we call that, winding the wool. And it's tedious and it's methodical and it's a real time killer, and all you want to do is create color and visuals and textures, and here you are stuck just winding the yarn. Well, that's like your first draft of your story or your novel. It's very much the same concept. You know it's going to be crap, but you've got to persevere anyway.
Yes, and one of the things that can help a writer to wind the yarn is to do a NaNoWriMo, which is, if people don't know about this, it's the National Novel Writing Month.
Yes, November.
November is one of those kind of nothing months. It's kind of stuck between Thanksgiving, well, Canadian Thanksgiving, and Halloween and Christmas, December. So this was an initiative started in the United States, where a bunch of friends got together and said, well, let's see if we can write a novel in the month of November. And it's an idea that's taken off. So now, across the globe, people try to write 50,000 words in a month.
Yeah.
It sounds daunting. However, if you divide 50,000 by 30, it's roughly 1,700 words a month, a day, rather.
Yeah.
And that is quite doable.
Yes, 1,700 is doable, even if you, like me, have a day job. But if you're retired or if your full-time job is writing, it should be quite doable, 1700. And remember, these are first draft words. The intention is not to stop and polish every word into gold while you're writing. It's to teach you as a writer to get those words down on paper or into your computer or wherever you do, and think about your polishing later, because you can't do anything till you've got a product.
Absolutely. So one of the things I'll be working on over the next year is to finish the sequel to my first novel, Wendigo Fire, and its working title at the moment is called Wendigo Ice. The Wendigo Fire was set in the summer, where forest fires, which play a large part in the book, are a present hazard. But you can't write a Canadian novel without writing about the Canadian winter.
That's right.
So Wendigo Ice is set in the Canadian winter, which we're experiencing right now, and it's a good inspiration to actually capture the absolute misery of being cold, being hypothermic, being otherwise challenged.
And I can't wait to be one of your first beta readers for it. I'm going to tell our listeners a little personal story about Wendigo Fire. When you were about to come out with Wendigo Fire, you had a number of us help with beta reading. And I, being as busy as I am, I had put it off and I'd wanted to get into it because I'd read little bits of it and I knew it was really good. And one day, something happened medically, and I found myself in emergency for 14 hours waiting to see a doctor. And I was near the end of Wendigo Fire reading it on my phone. Because what else are you going to do in emergency other than worry about your health? And my phone started to die. And I said, Doctor, I need help. Get me a charger. And he just laughed. He was so good about it. It was a young doctor. And he came running over with a charger. And I finished reading it in one sitting. And it was such a wonderful novel. I was kind of glad I had this enforced opportunity to read it, you know.
Oh, thank you, Donna. That is just the absolutely the most wonderful thing that a writer can hear, is that somebody really liked their work.
I just loved it. I didn't just like it. I just loved it. And it really is an adventure. It's a thriller, but it's also an adventure. So I really highly recommend Wendigo Fire by M.H. Callway, my friend and well-established crime writer in Canada.
Thank you so much, Donna.
You're welcome. And Madeline, thank you for joining me again on Dead to Rights to talk about the new anthology. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure, Donna. And please, all you aspiring writers, don't forget to send in your work to our contest.
And that is mcallway1@gmail.com.
That's right. And we'd love to see your work in the key of 13.
Our heartfelt thanks go out to Madeline Harris Callway, who writes as M.H. Callway, for joining us today to talk about In the Key of 13, the upcoming anthology by the Mesdames of Mayhem. And if you've got a story or are working on a story that fits with our theme of music and murder, by all means get in touch with Madeline at mcallway1@gmail.com, and do so quickly because our contest is about to close. Thanks, and I hope that you'll participate in our short story contest. Are you a published author, and would you like to join us on Dead to Rights? If so, contact me, Donna Carrick, at carrickpublishing@rogers.com, and in the subject line say Dead to Rights Interview. I'll be happy to feature you and your work on our podcast. All music, including our theme song, Eyes of Gold, has been composed and performed by Ted Carrick. You can find myself, Donna Carrick, or my husband, Alec Carrick, on Facebook or on Twitter, and you can also reach us at Dead to Rights Pod or at Carrick Publishing, and our Twitter handle is at Carrick Pub. Thanks for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the podcast next week when we'll bring you our interview with Lana Webb, the author of Lonesome Wolf. Have a great week.
a dusty road, man alone. His vital signs go on hold, and I don't know what you've been told, but the years have turned my eyes gold. And I told you what you told me, we'd never be in the same boat for free. Yet it rides, let it rock.